All right, you guys have done a value scale. Now it's time to put that value scale to use by shading a dodecahedron. So will look like a three-dimensional form, and each one of these planes, a plane is a flat surface, remember, will have a different value, just like your value scale going from dark to light. We're going to have planes that go from dark to light. I'm going to darken in this shadow just a little bit because it didn't print out very good. If you need to, you can trace this off of your screen very carefully. Don't push down on your screen too much, or you can just draw it. You start out with this pentagon shape, and then you do a bunch of other pentagons very carefully. Okay, we're going to say our light source is coming from this direction, mostly because our shadow is already going over here, and we know it is. And then we're going to number from lightest to darkest. So if the light source is coming from this direction, this plane is getting all the light. It's going to stay white. We can leave that white. Might just put a tiny 1 really lightly right there. And then the top is getting quite a bit of light too. I'm going to lightly write a 2 in there. And then this plane right here, we'll say it's the 3 and the 4 underneath. The 4 is a little bit out of the light, so that's why it's got more shadow than the 3. You'll just have to take my word for it. Then we got the 5, 6, and we'll just for fun, we'll call shadow 7. So I'm going to start by shading from lightest to darkest, just because I'm right-handed and I'm going to move this way. If you're left-handed, you can start from dark and go light, just to prevent smearing. Or, this is a pro tip that you should always use when you're shading. You can put a piece of paper down on your paper on top of the drawing and rest your hand on that to prevent smearing your drawing all over the place. Okay, now remember, it's always easier to go back and make things darker than it is to go back and make them lighter. So you want to always start lighter than you think you need to be. Now I am barely even pushing on this pencil at all. It's mostly just moving it back and forth. I'm letting the weight of the pencil shade that number 2 because that's the lightest plane where I'm actually doing some shading. And I'm going to come into plane number 3 and do the same thing. Big time rule for this drawing. In fact, I'm going to write it. No smearing. Smearing is a lazy way to get your shading done. You can smear on your own time. I want you to learn how to use your pencil. Smearing's like what's that called when the singers, it's auto-tune. When singers just like push a button and it turns their voice into a certain note. And everybody knows they did it. It's so easy to tell when someone's smeared. It doesn't look good. Okay, I'm going across it in a different direction now, which I don't necessarily recommend, but I'm just trying to make this as smooth as possible. Okay, moving on to number 4, which will be slightly darker than number 3. So I'm holding my pencil the same way, still pretty loose, but I am pushing down harder with my fingers just to get it a little bit darker. And this is how I'm holding my pencil. That doesn't necessarily mean that's how you have to hold yours. You find what's comfortable for you. Okay, I'm getting dangerous here by shading one direction and then going over in another. But as long as I'm careful and I'm pushing down the same amount, it should turn out pretty smooth. Another thing, you want to make sure that the surface that you're shading on doesn't have any little bumps. You see that little dark thing? There's a couple little bumps on this table I'm working on. Okay, up to 5. Shading is so amazing how you can take this flat looking thing and give it dimension just by using different values. Okay, my darkest plane. I got a little bit lazy with that and went quick. I probably should have started from the left here because there's less space to go back and forth than this way. So right now this plane is not looking good. I've got a whole variety of values in there. Need to really go back in and smooth it out without smearing. And no, using a tissue does not exempt the fact that you're smearing. Okay, now I'm going to just kind of step back and look. If I squint my eyes, this is a trick I learned in college. If I squint my eyes, I can see that these two values are really similar and these two values are really similar. So I'm going to fix that by darkening number 5. Don't want it to be the same as any other plane. So it still needs to be a little bit lighter than number 6, but darker than number 4. Notice I'm not going back into lighten number 4 because that's pretty hard to do. Have to erase and then it gets all messy. Okay. Could just even darken number 6 up a little bit, so it's definitely darker than number 5. Okay. Then I'm going to try to see if I can darken number 3 and still have it be lighter than number 4. Okay, it's looking pretty similar to number 4. So darken this up a little bit. See how there's a lot of back and forth to get things right. That's why if you have your value scale handy, it's best just to use your value scale, put it right next to the spot you need to do. Look at the scale, be like, okay, that's mid-range value, number 4, and then shade it just like it is on the value scale. Okay, feeling pretty good about that. I could have maybe gone lighter on this too, but it's too late to go back and erase. Now I'm going to do the cast shadow. Cast shadows are usually very dark right at the base of the object. Depending on how bright the light is, they might be light at the base of the object, but we're saying our light source is pretty bright coming this direction. And then it gets a little bit lighter as it goes out. And I had drawn an outline, but shadows, they don't have outlines. If you don't believe me, look at the ground right now and tell me, does your shadow have an outline? Probably not. If it does, ooh, we should be concerned. So dark right there at the base, tiny bit lighter as it goes out. And we're going to call that good. When you finish your dodecahedron, take a picture and submit on Canvas for grading.